Welcome to chapter number 5.2, where we will talk about large language models, short LLMs, and more specifically about the recently released tool that you might have heard of or already used, GPT. First, let's start. What is an LLM? It's short for large language model. It's a very complex computational model based on neural networks, so it's actually a machine learning model using some algorithms. It's built on a massive amounts of text data used as training data. So machine learning models, you often refer to that they are trained using data. And here there are really billions of data points included in these large language models. That's why they also have the permission to be called large. And they are created to provide a human-like text based on the input received. So actually the input would be a text typed by me, for example, and the output should also be a text, not a number, not an image. Currently the output should be a human-like text. How do these models work? I can only report this quite simplified. I don't think that it's most important for us to understand how these models work in a more detailed manner. Let's look at this in a more simplified fashion. So we have our input, which would be, for example, a statement. I'm prompting the model with something like, I don't know, who was the chancellor in Germany in 1952 or something like that. Then the tokenization happens. So my statement, my input, will be broken down into little tokens, which could be words or even smaller parts of words. And this is then fed into the model. So the information is passed through the model, then the neural network calculations happen. So all these tokens go through the neural network, resulting in a final calculation that can then lead to the generation of output. So actually what the model has calculated will then be retranslated into text. And actually how these large language models work, the model always predicts which is the most likely token to follow the previous token. So for example, really stupid example, but if the first token would be Jacob, so my name, maybe the highest probability would be Beck, so my last name, to be the next token. So that's how these bits of text are generated and then in the end up as a larger text or sentence. And then this information will be put out in the model or in the interface. Now the most prominent or well-known large language model recently is ChatGPT. It's a large language model by the company OpenAI and was first released in November 2022. Since then, millions of people have downloaded or have created an account and accessed it. The latest version that we are currently on is called GPT-4. Not everyone has already access to it. People are on the waiting list and you also have to pay for this. But it has been released to the public, at least to some part. And the queries, the so-called prompts, so the input that you feed the model with, are entered in this kind of Google-like search bar. I put a screenshot down here. So you actually just send a message to the model and then it will respond to you. And with no further ado, let's try this. I think it's most interesting to just try it ourselves before, or other than hearing about this from me in a lecture style. So let me put this aside, and here you can see my ChatGPT output or ChatGPT interface. Here you can see my history, my account, and this is how the interface looks like. Currently it's just this search bar or message bar and nothing else. And now I would like to do some example operations with you to just show how powerful the tool is. let's reload it, because sometimes it needs to be freshly reloaded to work. For example, let's say I am one of you guys, one of you students, and I can't get the exercise sheet done, and I want to write an email to Jan and me. You could prompt the ChatGPT, write an email to Jan and Jakob, in which you tell them that the current exercise sheet is too hard. Let's see what our model does. It calculates and then it just outputs our email. And we actually get a nicely written email with even a subject. Dear Jan and Jakob, I hope this email finds you well. I wanted to reach out and so on. I'm not going to read out the entire email. But here the model in a really long text explains why the current email is, the current exercise sheet is too difficult. We could even say, now we could say, please shorten the email. Just 4 sentences. If we want to say it should be a shorter. All right, that's it. Now here's a placeholder for the name. Let's say my name is Peter. Maybe it even understands directly. Yes. It will already plug in my name, Peter, here now. Great. So we can use it, for example, to write pieces of text, even essays, emails, and so on. Now let's say, please translate to German, and then we would get this email in German. So it has the capabilities to do things in multiple languages. I don't know about very niche languages. We could try to figure that out, but German and English, for example, they obviously work. Let's think about a language that's maybe not that commonly used. Let's say we translate it to Mongolian, if that is hopefully a language. Yes, and it immediately works. So actually this model seems to be capable to use many languages. So here we can get a nice email, for example, but if I would read this, liebe Jan and Jakob, I would rephrase this. So it's maybe not perfect, but it's like really quick to write these pieces of text for you. Also, what could be a different application? Let's say I need to give a presentation on, let's think about, let's say, welfare states in Europe. What are, or let's say, give me 5 bullets, what is most interesting. So for example, for brainstorming, let's say we need 5 ideas for a presentation. We can prompt our model like this, and it will give us actually great information. Maybe it's not the best in coming up with new ideas, but in reprocessing or putting out again stuff that the model has been trained with, it's quite good. So here our 5 bullets would be universal social protection, strong social safety nets, emphasis on work-life balance, active labor market policies, investment in education and skills development. I mean, it's maybe not the most creative or maybe not the fanciest way to present it, but these are not wrong information. So what else? Let's say we have a statistics class. Let's ask ChatGPT, for example, what is chi-squared? Explain in easy language. Let's say we have really problems to understand this. And then we have the model that immediately puts or gives us some information about chi-squared, a really long abstract to explain to us how this actually works. How is the chi-squared test statistic calculated? Let's ask for this. Stuff that we would usually type in Google, actually. This tool might replace Google in the long run. I don't want to make any predictions, but I think it can be used in a similar fashion as Google. So here we get our step-by-step explanation how we can actually calculate this. Now what's of course more interesting for us is how we can use this for R code. So let's now think about, let's stay with the chi-squared example. Provide me with R code that calculates chi-squared for a 2 times 2 table. And then this output is generated really, really quick. So R here, for example, creates a, or here the R code first creates a fake data set or some artificial data, and then it gives us a lot of code how to calculate this. Here it actually does this in 4 or 5 quite tedious steps. Let's ask, isn't there a function to calculate chi-squared less complicated? All right, and then actually our ChatGPT shows us the chi-square test function. So what we can actually already see from this, it can help us to write code in a really, really quick manner. The code is mostly correct. You can easily copy it and then paste it into your R interface. But if you don't know anything about it, you wouldn't even know that this chi-square test function exists. So I think it can be used nicely also to write code, to debug some code. Let's look at this on Friday. But some basic R knowledge is actually needed a lot, or put differently, it facilitates how you can use ChatGPT for coding. Now we have seen some great applications, how to write an email, how to output R code, ask a stats question, do some brainstorming on a presentation. So all the nice use cases for university students. Let's see where it maybe comes to its limits. So we could actually ask the model, who is the current Chancellor of Germany? And here we see the model tells us the current Chancellor of Germany is Angela Merkel, but with the precaution, as of my knowledge, cut off in September 2021. So this is because we are not using GPT-4, but one of the earlier versions where the training data was only used until 2021. So it hasn't been trained with recent training data. The later models, GPT-4 and so on, they can even do a search on the internet for active search for information. So if we would prompt GPT-4, who's the current Chancellor of Germany, it would search this on the internet and just find out that it is actually Olaf Scholz and not Angela Merkel, and therefore provide the correct answer. So this is currently one limit of ChatGPT that we are using here with the Da Vinci model. So this problem is currently a problem with the free version that you guys might actually use, but it will hopefully, or it will for sure be solved in this later version. What else could we do? We could try to do some literature research with ChatGPT. Let's prompt it with provide me with literature that examines let's say the connection between Amazon orders and life satisfaction. I'm just making this up. Okay, so actually maybe this was a too niche question that I asked. It tells us that it doesn't have any opportunities to provide us with literature. Provide me with research articles that tackle poverty. Let's see if we can get some output here. Okay, so what we see, this has been fixed. I didn't know this, but it's really interesting. In a recent version of this model, you could ask ChatGPT for literature, and it would just make up fake citations or fake articles that didn't exist. If you put the name on Google, you wouldn't find anything. So actually, the current version of ChatGPT cannot be used for literature research, which stays the same, but for a different reason. I think they just fixed it, that they just don't output literature anymore and just tell you, no, I can't provide any literature. So unfortunately, we can't use it to find literature at this moment. Maybe one of the later versions, but this is currently one of the limits. And also one limit I found was tell a joke about R. That the jokes that ChatGPT tells are really not funny. Why did the statistician switch from Excel to R? Because they wanted to have a vector of fun. Well, I don't think this is particularly funny, and I've experienced this also previously, that the jokes are not really jokes. But yeah, I just wanted to show you some operations that you could do in ChatGPT. It's of course open for your own creativity. Do whatever you want. You can also evaluate if you liked or disliked the output. I now put a like here. I don't think I can withdraw it. You can easily copy the output. I just show you this. Okay. So it is really, really cool what you can do with this. I'm sure many of you or some of you have already tried it. But let's turn back to the presentation and talk about this a little bit. Let's see if this works. Yes, so we have tried the tool, and now what is our conclusion? I think ChatGPT or GPT models is a very, very powerful tool that can be used for a lot of things. But as the old Spider-Man saying, with great power comes great responsibility. I think it like in the same manner how it fascinates me, it also gives me some kind of shivers, because everything that exists can and will of course be used for bad, for, I don't know, fraud or something else. And even some of the developers and many AI experts are worried, and they have like already a couple of weeks ago signed a petition to pause these models for some time. And also the OpenAI company, they are currently saying that they are not working on GPT-5, so the next model, just because they need to understand the ramifications and the difficulties with GPT-4. So even the people that are developing these models and that should usually just advertise them are raising some caution. I think this is important to understand, that maybe we currently cannot understand how this development will turn out on a social perspective, or yeah, just for the population. And just as a recent example, Italy for a couple of weeks or months had banned ChatGPT because they were too afraid of the things that could come along with it. And let's say, I mean, as a maybe more feasible example, we as teachers now have to think about how ChatGPT changes academic teaching and so on. And I think it will have some great impact and will change many things, hopefully many things for good, and I think that will be true, but certainly not every application will be a good application. But it can help us with a lot of tasks, and we have to keep in mind that we are currently just in early iteration. So I told you it was released in November 2022. Now we are already at GPT-4 and so on. The velocity is really, really high, and of course the room for improvement is there. But we have seen that it fails to solve at least some of the tasks. And as always, therefore, let's conclude that we maintain at least some caution when using this on the individual level. Let's be careful with assuming the correctness of model output, whether it will be a statistics question or bullet points for your presentation or R code or whatever, don't assume for sure that everything is correct that the model puts out. Try to check it yourself, logical checks, fact checks, and so on. And I think this is generally important for models built on human data. Also, if we want to bring in again the social science perspective, the injustices that might be hidden in this training data, they must not transfer into the models. Let's say if we train large language models on some racist posts or newspaper articles on the internet, we will then also have a racist model. So we should really look at what training data goes into the training process, because if these unwanted things transfer into models, we might not be able anymore to locate them there. And just as a really small example, maybe you are interested in that, I wanted to show you that this is also part of my own research. We are doing some research on training data generation and how this affects the following machine learning models. Our just basic setting, I'm just talking about this for 1 or 2 minutes. We have humans labeling tweets. So we give humans tweets and we ask them to tell whether the tweet contains hate speech, offensive language, or neither of these two. And we do this in different experimental conditions. So we design different tasks and train models and see models to detect hate speech, and we want to see if these models actually turn out different depending on how we ask these humans. And just 2 little graphics from a study we have published last year. These headlines here show that we have 3 different annotation tasks or labeling tasks, and we can see depending on how you ask, you get different sets of data. So for example, if you ask them about hate speech first, you get much more hate speech, compared to when you ask about offensive language first, you get much less hate speech. So just as a small example to show you how these training data are changed depending on how they are collected. And if this happens in an unwanted fashion, then we will also have biased models, which we really don't want. And maybe a more feasible example here, we looked at the first language of our annotators or labelers. And we saw when annotators' first language was English, so maybe they were from the United States, they labeled significantly more tweets as hateful than when their first language was not English. It makes sense. People like me whose first language is not English, maybe they have a harder time to understand sarcasm, irony, and maybe some even slurs in hateful tweets. So I just wanted to show you this to stress how important it is to look at the training data of machine learning models, also for these large language models like ChatGPT. All right, with this short excursion, I will conclude with the video, and I'm looking forward to the session on Friday. I hope you have taken something about ChatGPT out of this video, and see you next time.